Welcome to the second video of my linguistics playlist. This time it deals with phonetics and phonology, as you will see in a second. There we are. Or in other words, this video deals with what sounds there actually are in a language. And I want to start by outlining the differences between phonetics and phonology because they are two different disciplines. So in phonetics, we're not dealing with a particular language, it's just sounds in general. Whereas in phonology, you're dealing with one particular language and its own subset of rules. Phonetics deals with the level of parole, according to de Saussure. So we're talking about the concrete realization of language, whereas phonology deals with the level of langue, which is the abstract set of rules that every language has. The basic unit in phonetics is the phone, which is just a sound. Whereas in phonology, we have the phoneme as the basic unit, whose definition will come later and is like the most important definition you have to take away from this video, also for exam purposes, just a little hint here. Then we have the notation. In phonetics, we notate our phonemes in narrow transcription, or our phones in narrow transcription, which is in the brackets that have corners, for lack of a better word. And then in phonology, we have broad transcription, which means the phonemes are notated in slashes. And then we have subdisciplines in both cases. In phonetics, that would be the articulatory phonetics, which deal with the production of speech. Then we have acoustic phonetics, which deal with transmission and physical aspects of sound. And we have auditory phonetics, which deal with perception of sound. So how do we, as hearers, perceive a sound? In phonology, we have the subdiscipline of phonotactics, which deals with the possible combinations of sounds in a given language. How do we produce speech? That will be the next important question. So we start in the lungs, where we produce an airstream. And this airstream is then pushed up into the trachea and the larynx. And in the larynx, we find the vocal folds, which can be in three positions, which you can see in the little sketch below. They can be open, they can be narrow, aligned, or they can be closed. So when we have aligned vocal folds, then we're talking about voicing because that produces friction. But we'll get to voicing again later. And then the airstream moves on through the articulators, which we'll also get to later. And finally, the sound is emitted through the mouth, in most cases in English, and or through the nose. And if you emit a sound through the nose, you have the velum lowered at all times. So the velum is the soft part that moves when you yawn, so that the airstream can get through there. Now, an important question, what does imperial pale ale have to do with it? Nothing. It just happens to have the same abbreviation as the International Phonetic Alphabet. But we really need that phonetic alphabet to elucidate the pronunciation of English, especially because English has a ridiculously unreliable orthography. If you know this lovely little poem that begins with "Dearest creature in creation, study English pronunciation," you will find lots of examples for that. And in case you don't have any notation of the imperial, not the imperial, now I fell into my own trap, the International Phonetic Alphabet, I will upload one, but I will see about that. So what criteria do we use to talk about all the phonemes? We have vowels and we have consonants. And in the case of vowels, they're always voiced and there is no obstruction of the airstream whatsoever, whereas consonants have an always obstructed airstream, at least partially. So the vocal folds can either be aligned or completely closed. Then we have the manner of articulation, which I will get to when I talk about the different consonants. Then we have voicing, which we talked about before, and we have the place of articulation, which is a different category for both vowels and consonants, but we'll also get to that. Then for the vowels, we also have the height of the tongue, the length, and whether they are monophthongs or diphthongs. The difference between a monophthong and a diphthong is visually that you write 2 phonemes for a diphthong and 1 for a monophthong. And also you can hear the difference because you have the second phoneme in the diphthong that modifies the quality of the sound in the same syllable. That's the important part here. So it's in one syllable and you can't say when exactly the change happens. You can pinpoint it, and that makes a diphthong a diphthong. So let's get right into it. Before I start explaining what P is all about, I want to take you through the categories. So on the left, you have the manner of articulation. On the top, symbolized by the bomb, you have a plosive or a stop, which means that you have a 3-phased articulation. You have a complete obstruction of the airflow in the beginning, then you, during the onset, and then you hold, still with obstruction. And then there's a sudden release of the airflow, also called the explosion. Below, I don't know why I chose a cactus exactly, but the cactus stands for fricative. The difference between a plosive and a fricative is that you have only a partial obstruction of the airflow, which also leads to the fact that you can hold a fricative for a long time. Whereas a plosive, you have no chance of holding the sound. It's over within a second or less, much less than that. So in the fricative, you have this partial obstruction, which leads to an audible friction. And then if you combine a plosive and a fricative, or in this case, the bomb and a cactus, you get the affricates, which combines a plosive and a fricative, which are articulated in the same place. And there you have a complete obstruction and then a continuous release of the airflow. Then, symbolized by the nose, we have the nasals, where the airflow is released through the nose and the velum is lowered. And below, symbolized by the 2 hands, we have the approximants, where 2 articulators approximate each other, but they're not close enough to create friction. So that was the manner of articulation in this lovely little design. I'm not that good at drawing, but anyway. Then in the middle you have the different articulators, or the place of articulation for the consonants. So you can see the alveolar ridge, which is the area behind your teeth. Then you have the lips, you have the teeth, you have the tongue, then you have the oral cavity, which is everything in your mouth and throat. Then you have the pharynx, which leads down to the epiglottis and to the larynx, and in the larynx you have the vocal folds. And above in pink you have the nasal cavity, and in the nasal cavity, that's the place where the nasals have their airflow coming through. And then you can see the velum is marked between the nasal cavity and the oral cavity. And the velum is that articulator that's lowered when you're pronouncing something where the airflow is released through the nose. You can also see the palate marked, that's the top of your mouth, the hard part, and the soft part that corresponds to it is the velum, which moves when you yawn, which is basically how you can distinguish it from the palate. And on the very right, you can see voicing, symbolized by +V, and voiceless sounds, symbolized by -V. These are 3 categories that we have to look at for consonants: manner of articulation, place of articulation, and voicing. So starting with P, we have a plosive, and we have a bilabial plosive, and we have a voiceless plosive. Whereas with B, we have the same thing as P in voiced form. So it's also bilabial, it's also a plosive, but it's voiced. And the difference between voicing and voiceless sounds can be felt when you touch your throat when you pronounce that sound, and if you can feel some kind of movement in your throat, then it's voiced. And if you don't feel anything there, then it's voiceless. That's an easy way of distinguishing the two if you're not sure. And in general, I would recommend just pronouncing the phonemes to yourselves to study, because that's actually, at least for me, that was the most efficient way of memorizing them. Next up, we've got T, or T, as it would be pronounced correctly, and that's an alveolar sound, so the tongue goes up to the part behind the teeth. It's also a plosive. There's no way you can hold it. You could try, but it doesn't work. And it's voiceless, and its counterpart, D, is also alveolar, also a plosive, but voiced. Then we've got K, which is velar, also plosive and voiceless, and its counterpart, G, which is also velar, also plosive, but voiced. So you may see a pattern forming here. I will resolve that in a couple of minutes. Now we come to the fricatives. So we've got, as you can hear, I could hold it, so it's a fricative, and is actually labiodental, so that's why lips and teeth are both circled. And then you have a voiceless sound here, whereas when you look at the counterpart, V, it's the same thing, fricative, labiodental, but voiced. Then we have this is the voiceless TH, where you have fricative, obviously, and it's interdental, because the tongue comes in between the teeth, and it's, as I just said, voiceless. You can have the same thing in a voiced form, the fricative, interdental, but voiced. Next up, we've got S. It's also fricative, it's alveolar, and it's voiceless, whereas its counterpart, the Z, is also fricative, is also alveolar, but it's voiced. Then you've got Sh, which is fricative, which is alveopalatal. So you have both the alveolar ridge involved and the palate. And it's voiceless. And again, you have a voiced counterpart, the J, which is also alveopalatal. And as I just pronounced it, I realized that, at least for me, it feels like the tongue is in between the alveolar ridge and the palate. So that's one way of memorizing that. It's also fricative and it's voiced. Then we have the glottal stop, which literally is the absence of sound. So we've got a completely closed area in the vocal folds. Complete obstruction, no airflow whatsoever gets through for a second. And it's, as it says, it's glottal. It's also, there's a mistake in the video, I'm sorry for that. It's a plosive. I just like to put it with the H because it's glottal. And yeah, it's obviously voiceless. I mean, it is the absence of sound. Then you have H, which is the second glottal sound, as I just said. That really is a fricative, and it's voiced. Then we get to the affricates. As you can see, both the bomb and the cactus are circled. And we've got an alveopalatal sound again here with the ch, and it's voiceless. But of course, there is also its voiced counterpart, the j, which is also an affricate. It's alveopalatal and it's voiced. And this is the point where I want to resolve the pattern you might have observed. You have lots of pairs. So the pair with H and the glottal stop is not quite right, because as I just noticed, the glottal stop was in the wrong category, it's a stop. But otherwise, you have the two glottal sounds, one voiceless, one voiced, and you can go through the plosives and the fricatives and the affricates like that. You have a voiced sound and its voiceless counterpart always. Then we get to the nasals. We have which is bilabial, because you press your lips together to form the sound, and it's voiced. Nasals are always voiced, so that's a rule of thumb, actually really a rule. Nasals are always voiced. Next nasal is n, which is alveolar, and as I just said, voiced. And the third and last nasal here is n, which is velar and nasal and voiced. Now the approximants, all of them are also voiced in English. We've got the w, which is bilabial, other than when you produce you don't press your lips together, but you just, yeah, it's rather like an explosion of the lips, w. And then you have voicing as in every approximant. The o is also an approximant. It's alveolar, and you can call it a lateral as well. So you can call it an approximant, or you can call it a lateral because the airstream is led past your tongue on both sides of the tongue. And yeah, it's voiced. Then you have the that's alveolar as well. And it's also an approximant, and it's also voiced. And last but not least, for the consonants, we have the y, which is the only purely palatal sound in this list. It's an approximant and it's voiced. And now we get to the vowels. For the vowels, we have new criteria to talk about them. So we have the height of the tongue. So how close is your tongue to the top of the mouth, to the palate? Can be very close, then it's closed. It can be very far away, then it's open, and you have the intermediate categories, half closed and half open. Then the place of articulation in this case is, where does the tongue go up? Is it in the front? Is it in the center of your mouth? Or is it in the back of the tongue? Then symbolized by the two rulers, you have the length of the sound. Is it a long sound or is it a short sound? And below you have the position of the lips. The circle is rounded, the two lines is spread, and the combination of both sounds, both symbols is neutral. So let's get into it. We have a as in father, and this is an open vowel, a monophthong, obviously, and it's central, so the tongue goes up in the middle of your mouth, and it's a long sound, which is also symbolized by the dots behind the sound, or behind the phoneme, and the lips are in a neutral position, so neither spread nor rounded. Next, we've got the pot sound, which is an exclusively British sound. It doesn't exist in American English. It's also open. It's a back vowel, and the lips are rounded, and it's short. And here's a little rule that helps you remember the vowels. All the back vowels are rounded, all of them. And you don't have any rounding in front. All the front sounds are spread. That's just a nice little thing to remember. Then next we've got the open aw, as in law. This is half open. It's also a back vowel. It's long, as you can see by the dots again, and the lips are rounded as well. Then we've got the short U, or also called the horseshoe because of its shape, as in book. And this is a half-closed sound. It's also a back vowel, short, and the lips are rounded as well. And we've got the U, which is a closed monophone, back vowel, with rounded lips and, again, visible by the dots. It's a long sound. And those were the 4 back vowels. Then we've got the but sound. It's a nice little triangle here. This is an open monophone. It's central and it's short, and the lips are in a neutral position. So you can also remember that for every central vowel, the lips are neutral in English. Then we've got the schwa. You can see 2 symbols up top now. The right phoneme is the normal schwa, which exists in both British and American English, whereas the left phoneme only exists in American English because it has R coloring, which is unique to American English. And for example, you will find the R color schwa in words like father in American English in the 2nd syllable. And the normal schwa would be, if I try a British pronunciation of father, it would be father. That would be normal schwa in contrast to that. And one important thing about the schwa, it can never be stressed. There can never be any stress on the schwa. So just remember that, even if you don't know yet what stress is or how to note it, but it's an important rule when you get to phonetics class. So the schwa is a central vowel. It's half open, it's short, and it's neutral. The schwa has its stronger counterpart, which is the bird sound. Again, we have the normal bird sound without the R coloring, which is exclusive to British English. And we have the R color schwa, which is exclusive to American English and just the equivalent of the non-R colored bird sound in British English. It's a long sound, as you can see by the dots. The lips are neutral, it's central, and it's half open. Then we've got the esh, as in back, and this is an open monophone. It's a front vowel, the lips are spread, back, you can try it, and it's short. Then the half open front monophone is e, as in pet, and it's, like I said, a front vowel, it's half open, it's short, and the lips are spread, as in every front vowel in English. Then we've got the short I, as in pit. It's half closed, it's front, it's short, and the lips are spread. Now we've got the E, as in feet. This is the closed monophone of the front vowels, and the lips are spread, and it's a long vowel, as you can see by the dots. Now we've still got the diphthongs left. And for the diphthongs, you have the raising diphthongs, which you can see on the left, symbolized by the arrow going upwards. And on the right, we've got the centering diphthongs, symbolized by the arrows coming together. Now, one important thing is that in American English, you don't have centering diphthongs. You just don't have them. They're purely British. And also the one on the left of the centering diphthongs with the schwa and the short u, that's also purely British. It's the equivalent of the one above it, of the OU. That's the American equivalent to the schwa u. So just for a short sample of pronunciation, raising diphthongs are oi, I, a, ow, o, and o. So the O is the British one, the O is the American one. And then on the right, you've got ear. I'm not a British speaking person, so this sounds horrible. An example word would be beer for the E schwa. So basically, you have an R in American English, wherever the schwa is. Now, all that's left to discuss are some important things, starting with the most important definition, the phoneme. The phoneme is the smallest meaning distinguishing unit in a language. If somebody wakes you up at 4 a.m. and they ask you what's a phoneme, you should be able to recite that definition. You really have to know that. That's so basic, has to be in your head. Then we've got minimal pairs. Minimal pairs are used to establish the phonetic inventory of a language, or to determine whether something is a phoneme or not. So if you take two words with the same amount of phonemes, two words that differ in meaning, and one phoneme exactly. No more, no less. And if you have that, if you have something like fun and bun, where you have two words that have one phoneme that is different and a different meaning, then you can say that f and b are phonemes. Same goes for lat and lit, where you have a and I, they are phonemes. Bunk and junk, b and y are phonemes, and so on and so forth. Also for sin and sing, because n and ng are one phoneme each, even though you have n and g as the orthography. It's just one phoneme. Now we've also got allophones in English, which are concrete realizations of the same phoneme. And the example I brought you here are the dark L and the clear L. Clear L is the L on the left without any extra notations, and the line through the L on the right signifies the dark L. And these allophones here are in complementary distribution, which means that they cannot appear in the same places because there are rules that exclude each phoneme from appearing where the other has to appear. Now, if we look at British English, because that's something purely British, you have the clear L in the beginning of a syllable, as in clear. If I really try to speak like that. In American, you don't have that problem. You just always have dark L. But in British English, you have that distinction. So at the beginning of a syllable, as I said, it's clear L, and at the end of a word or a syllable, it's a dark L. And that is always like that. That doesn't change the meaning of these words. So if I said clear or clear, it's still the same word, still the same meaning, so it's no phoneme. But it does sound differently. It has a different quality about it, and that's why they are allophones. And with this, I come to the end of phonetics and phonology. I know it's a lot, but just try to embrace it. Personally, I like it a lot, but I think that's rather subjective. Anyway, I hope you understood some parts of phonetics, and I'll see you again for morphology next time.